Thank you for joining LAS today as we explore the Canadian Free Trade Agreement and the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement related to municipal procurement. My name is Jeff Barton, and I'm the Energy and Asset Services Manager here at LAS, and I'll be taking you through some highlights of these regulations. Before we dive into our main topic, I'd like to give a brief introduction on who LAS is and what we do. LAS was created in 1992 as the business services arm of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and we are incorporated as a not-for-profit organization under the laws of Canada and are mandated to work with Ontario municipalities as well as organizations from the broader public sector to help you realize lower costs, higher revenues, and enhance staff capacity through cooperative procurement efforts and innovative training programs and services. Some of the services we offer include energy services such as workshops, planning, and LED lighting, asset management services such as fleet and roads, commodities such as natural gas, electricity, and fuel, and administrative services such as group benefits, risk management, and home and auto insurance, and finally our investment. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start by providing a high-level background on the new procurement and trade agreements to gain an understanding of how they affect municipal procurement. From there, we'll shift gears to talk about what LAS is doing about these changes and how it might affect those organizations who use our programs. Although the bulk of this content contained in this presentation was developed in concert with our lawyers, this webinar is meant for information purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Attendees are encouraged to review their trade agreements and consult their own counsel to ensure they're in compliance with all the requirements. So, municipalities procure for goods and services all the time to ensure they're getting the best value for taxpayers' dollars and to allow companies in their communities the opportunity to work with them. In the past, municipalities have generally used the Agreement on Internal Trade, or AIT, as their guide. However, some have also looked to the broader public sector procurement directive. The AIT is a federal, provincial, and territorial agreement to facilitate interprovincial trade. Annex 502.4 provided the guidance for municipalities, municipal organizations, school boards, and publicly funded academic, health, social service entities on procurement provisions. It applied to measures related to procurement within Canada of goods, services, and construction. It applied to buying groups such as LAS and placed an obligation on municipalities to cause these buying groups to conform to the agreement. It covered non-discrimination, transparency, scoring, and the fairness of the procurement process. It also had exceptions and exemptions. The shortfall was that there was no process for dispute resolution and remedies to proponents who were undertaking or responding to RFPs or tenders. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement, or CFTA, replaced the AIT as of July 1st, 2017. Its objective was to reduce barriers to the free movement of goods and services within Canada, and also to establish an open and efficient open, efficient, and stable domestic market. Following that, the Canadian-European Comprehensive and Economic Trade Agreement, also known as CETA, came into effect on September 21st, 2017. It was meant to be a progressive free trade agreement covering all sectors and aspects of the Canada-EU trade to eliminate or reduce those barriers. Under CETA, there's a heavier emphasis on goods than on services. It's important to know that you don't assume that continued compliance with the BPS directive or AIT means you're complying with CETA or CFTA. The trick is to assess CETA and CFTA against previous directives. You should also note that the Government of Canada has done significant alignment between the two trade agreements. The next few slides will highlight some of the key changes in effect as a result of CETA and CFTA. The chart you should be seeing now shows the thresholds for when a municipality is required to conduct an open procurement process. In the past, under AIT, the procurement value was $100,000 or greater for goods and services, or $250,000 or greater in the case of construction. CFTA retains those same benchmarks. The CETA amounts, however, are higher at $340,600 for goods and services and $8.5 million for construction. Note that both CETA and CFTA are adjusted for inflation over time. The amounts shown are over the life of the contract, or what is the expected total value of the contract. For each procurement, this means applying and documenting procurement processes that are consistent with the trade agreements and the broader public sector procurement directive, if applicable, based on the new rights and remedies available to suppliers. In most cases, municipalities will fall under CFTA and CETA. For LAS, this means we now have to estimate how much the aggregated value of the work is for all organizations signing on to our programs. AIT permitted formal processes such as the request for information or for expressions of interest if warranted, and many municipalities use these processes. The RFI is often used to inform a request for tender or proposal. However, under CETA and CFTA, the procuring entity, in this case the municipality, should be careful not to provide any particular supplier any information that might prejudice fair competition between the suppliers, or seek or accept in a manner that would have the effect of precluding competition, advice that may be used in the preparation or adoption of technical specification for a specific procurement from a person who has commercial interest in the procurement. Many municipalities use vendors of record as well. In building your list of pre-qualified suppliers, you must allow pre-qualified vendors to participate in a procurement unless you have indicated in the pre-qualification any limitation and criteria for selecting who will bid. The VOR list can have rules associated with it to allow only some to participate in certain pre-stated scenarios. CETA and CFTA reflect a common belief that lists of pre-qualified suppliers can provide a convenient means of reducing participation by other suppliers over a longer period of time. So to prevent this, the requirement is to provide an annual opportunity for suppliers to be added to refreshed lists if the list is to remain active for longer than 3 years. However, you only have to do a pre-qualification once if the term of the list is less than 3 years. So let's talk about the procurement deadline, procurement timelines. So the agreement in internal trade had no minimum posting period, though I know municipalities, they likely posted for 3 to 4 weeks on average. Under CFTA, the protocols are ambiguous, requiring a reasonable amount of time. However, the timelines shown on these slides are specific to CETA, so the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement. Under CETA, open procurement opportunities must be posted for a minimum of 40 calendar days. That's 5 weeks and 5 days. This can be reduced by 5 days, which would be down to 35 days or 5 weeks, if the bid documents are posted electronically on public procurement sites such as Merck's, Bid and Go, Bids and Tenders, and the like. This can be further reduced by 5 days down to 30 days or 4 weeks and 2 days if submissions are received electronically. So that was the poll earlier. If you're able to receive them electronically, you can reduce it even further. So that's either via email submission or using an online software or website. Finally, this can be further reduced by another 5 days down to 25 days if the tender document is posted at the same time as the procurement notice. There is an exception to these timelines if you're using second step procurement, such as the vendors of record option. Under CETA, a procuring entity that uses selective tendering may select a mutually agreed period for the second step of procurement. So based on that agreement, such time period may be reduced to not less than 10 days. So there's a minimum 10 days there. A general exception can be applied using a posting time of 10 calendar days if the published notice was released at least 40 days earlier and not more than 1 year earlier. Like the AIT, CFTA and CETA does not permit EPS or broader public sector entities to prefer a particular province or region, but it does permit a preference for Canadian value add and limited tendering to Canadian goods, services, or suppliers. This right would be subject to Canada's international treaty obligations, including CETA. So you are able to limit yourself, but be careful how your terms and conditions will exclude vendors by limiting participation to suppliers that have previously worked with you, which denies suppliers not previously contracted with, or those with relevant experience in another jurisdiction. And don't exclude vendors by requiring experience that is not essential to meet the requirements of the RFP. And make sure that your technical specifications don't create unnecessary obstacles to trade. You may want to limit the conditions you set to those that are essential to ensure a supplier has the legal and financial capabilities and the commercial and technical abilities to undertake the procurement. However, procuring entities can exclude them if they have significant deficiencies in their performance of any substantive requirement or obligation under prior contracts. So if they did not perform previously, you do have the right to exclude them. Another change is that procuring organizations such as municipalities now have a duty to publish a public notification of award on their tendering website within 72 days for a reasonable period of time, according to the regulation, according to the agreement. The notice must include the description of goods and services, the name and address of the municipality, the name and address of the successful supplier, the value of the tender and the date of award, and if you use limited tendering, then any conditions or circumstances that justify that use. You must also promptly inform participating bidders of the decision. For LAS, this means we'll be making RFP documents and this notice available on our website. Any contract negotiations following the close of the RFP should continue to be specified in the procurement documents. CETA and CFTA both provide the ability to conduct negotiations where it appears from the procuring entity's evaluation that no tender is obviously the most advantageous. Previously, under AIT and the BPS directive, the primary purpose of a debriefing was to speak to the strengths and weaknesses of a submission, explaining where a vendor fell short, how they could do better, or where they could improve for next time. If the unsuccessful vendor wanted to find out more about the successful bid, they would have to use the Freedom of Information process. Under CETA and CFTA, the purpose and level of this disclosure has changed. Instead of asking how well did a vendor do, the question now becomes, how did the other successful vendor do better? Without revealing confidential business information that might prejudice fair competition between suppliers, information about the successful bid must be directly compared with unsuccessful vendors as part of a disclosure requirement for debriefing, if requested by the unsuccessful vendor. The outcomes of this change helps to communicate and socialize the vendor community. In addition, by providing evaluations as mentioned, it would, as a process, lead to a better product in the end for everyone. But what if the unsuccessful vendor challenges your explanations and reasoning? Under AIT, there was no requirement for a municipality to commit to a binding dispute resolution process, and there was no remedy available to vendors. This has changed, though, under CETA and CFTA. Ontario is now required to institute a timely, effective, transparent, and non-discriminatory administrative or judicial review procedure to address breaches of the procurement chapter. Judicial review means that we may get challenged not just at the end of a process, but at any stage of the procurement process. This means we'll have to do our due diligence when setting up the procurement documents and to have a comprehensive document process to ensure fairness with regards to the increased power that suppliers now have to order a dispute. What do we mean by any stage of the process? For example, if an applicant is rejected early because they didn't fulfill the mandatory early requirements, they must be provided notice early, and they would have the ability to challenge while the procurement is still ongoing. This preserves the supplier's opportunity to participate in the procurement. The province was to make such review resources available as of fall this year. But until that time, it is up to the procuring entity to have their own procedure in place. For now, you could consider a company such as the AVR Institute, and I'll give you their information later. They're a membership organization set up to help municipalities through and the broader public sector through judicial review. Their members are arbitrators and mediators in all different areas of expertise. If needed, they can provide you with various mediation options depending on the complexity and price point you're looking for. At this point, there's no need to engage them unless you need their service. And as mentioned, we'll include their contact info at the end of the webinar. An unlimited damages award is possible, but be careful when you're crafting your procurement documents to limit the cost of these damages to procurement preparation or the cost of the vendor challenge or both. And don't be afraid to cancel an RFP process that is flawed, rather than attempting to subvert the process. Maintaining transparency and fairness is a big part of the CFTA and CETA framework, so don't take chances. For those who currently use our services, or intend to use our services, the next few slides will be of particular interest. It's LAS's commitment to keep on side with trade agreements, and we will do so through the following. We want to ensure municipal compliance with trade agreements for those municipalities who choose to participate in our programs and services. We've worked with our lawyers to ensure the terms of our RFPs, the conditions, and the processes follow new CETA and CFTA requirements. We will be implementing clear procedures for a comprehensive documentation of the procurement process. As is our practice, we use committee participation in our RFPs and evaluations, and these committees are made up of municipal and other experts in the industry. And what they do is ensure fairness and protect municipalities. They provide the right products and services and allow for due diligence on items that LAS may not be 100% familiar with. We will communicate clearly and transparently throughout our procurement process. We will give upfront clear communication with vendors as to the process, and we will give reasons specific to why a vendor was chosen. And for those who weren't, if requested, we will provide a summary evaluation listing their strengths and weaknesses. We've created a page on our website where we'll make the RFP and results publicly available. and we will provide upfront clear communications with suppliers about the process. We're working right now to set specific standards and criteria to ensure the best vendor is selected for our programs. Some examples include taking into account the lack of geographic constraint on competition, focusing carefully on how we determine scoring criteria and mandatory requirements to make sure these are objective and have no room for interpretation. Perhaps one of the greatest advantages to our procurement process is that it solves the capacity issue faced by many of our members. We have done the hard work on your behalf and have taken steps to ensure compliance with the new regulations. This allows your staff to focus on other areas. The municipal and public sector organizations using our programs and services can rest assured in our processes, knowing that we seek out the best price and that we provide the best possible value. Our products and services are selected using rigorous criteria and standards, and municipalities can defer to our process and know that they are protected by a fair and comprehensive process. So there are some things that municipalities will need to do here. One of them is that it is your municipality's responsibility to be compliant with the CFTA and to publicly declare your intent to participate in a buying group. So those who are using LAS services or programs will need to declare that. And the requirements for this are found in Article 504, Section 5 through 7 of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. For those using our services or programs, this means posting a declaration, as mentioned earlier. It is recommended that your declaration be posted on the public notice website at your organization for a minimum of 2 weeks and at least once annually. To create your municipality's declaration, here's a sample you could copy and paste onto a document with your municipality's letterhead. The following language will satisfy the requirements of the CFTA. So it basically says that Municipality X intends to participate in one or more procurements conducted by LAS between, and then you insert the time frame, and it directs you where to find more information or to access the RFP that notices that LAS has posted. So if you're in one of our programs currently, watch for an email with this text included, and it will also be posted on our website under our Do Business With Us heading. There are a number of resources. Before we wrap up, there's a number of resources where you can find more information related to the public procurement process. And these websites are listed here. You can also Google the BPS Directive, CETA, and CFTA websites. For dispute resolution, the ADR Institute, or Alternative Dispute Resolution Institute of Canada, exists to help public sector organizations through the judicial review, and their information is posted here as well. That about wraps this up. We'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar. And we'd like to encourage you to get in touch with us if you have questions and let us know how else LAS can help your community. Right now, we'd like to open up the floor to any questions that may have come in. Robin is asking, apparently piggybacking options are no longer permitted. How are you dealing with this with the LAS programs? I'm not sure what you're referring to about the piggybacking options. However, there is opportunity for municipalities to participate in a cooperative purchasing group, which LAS is, and the requirements are basically they have to post that declaration. Will the municipal website qualify for the public advertising requirements? That's a good question. I'm not sure on that. Our lawyers have stated that it must be posted publicly, so I would anticipate that that may be okay. That's something that you may want to check with your counsel on. Another question is, do we have to have our procurement policy updated for CETA or CFTA if we have agreements with LAS? I believe if you're participating in a service right now, I believe those get grandfathered in. However, if you renew or sign up for a new service, then you will have to post that declaration. And it's probably a good idea to update your procurement policies to make sure that you're in line with CETA and CFTA, regardless if you're using LAS services or not. The next question is regarding the additional 5 days if the tender is posted at the same time as the notice. So that, if you'll recall, that brings it down to 25 days. It was my understanding that the notice had to be posted prior to the tender. I don't have the article and section in CETA at my fingertips. So it is my understanding that as long as you're doing a public posting at the same time as the tender, then it does reduce 5 days, but I don't have that exact reference. Another question. For the vendor of record, is it a requirement that we permit vendors to apply for inclusion on a list after the process has closed, and that we keep this posted on our website on an ongoing basis? I'm not sure that you would have to post it on an ongoing basis, but I don't believe you can add vendors to the list after the process is closed if you're using a list. So my thought there would be perhaps you would run that vendor of record annually or every few years, and when it's open for vendors to apply, then they could apply at that time. Robin is stating that participating agencies, so if you're using our services, must be named within the bid documents. I'm not sure that would work all the time, because when we go out, for instance, we're out on the streets right now with an RFP, we don't necessarily know which municipalities are going to use that service. We have an idea, but we don't know specifics, and there's been no commitment. So I think where possible, that may be the case, but it's not always possible to do that. Jamie asks if we are already part of a purchasing group in our local areas, do we need to post something similar? Yes. So this doesn't apply just to those participating in LAS purchasing groups. It applies if you're using any cooperative purchasing group. So you will need to post that for others as well. Currently, our website does not include the award amount for RFPs. Does this value have to be publicly posted on our website? I'm not sure on that. We'll have to look into that answer and get back to you on that. Will the declaration of intent be acceptable if joining a co-op venture midterm of the contract, or must you be committed from the time of the bid posting? My suggestion would be that the declaration would be acceptable at the time you join. So for instance, LAS runs a number of programs and we have municipalities joining the program at all different points in time. To participate in provincial buying vendor of record programs is simply posting our intent enough. That's my understanding, that if you wanted to participate in a vendor of record program or a cooperative purchasing program, it's simply posting your intent. Another question here is, can your lawyers look into the named participating agencies and ability to piggyback and circle back to this group? Is that, I'm guessing, Robin, that relates back to the earlier comment that we have to list the participating agencies in the RFP. So yeah, we can certainly look into that and get back to you. One last question was, will any workshops on the new regulations be offered besides this? At this point in time, there is no plan to offer additional workshops, but the webinar will be posted. And if you do have questions, feel free to shoot them our way, and we can certainly do our best to help you out. All right, thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.